nurses strike, and the nurses are growing impatient with the government over the lack of action on the collective bargaining agreement. This comes as the ongoing nurses strike entered its 12th day today. And even as this unfolds, it is emerging that there is a rift between two factions of officials of the nurses union. Our reporter Timothy Otieno is covering these developments and now joins us live from the Railways Club here in the capital. Team, talk to us about what's happening. I understand the nurses were to have a press conference. Has that happened? If so, what did they say?
Well, Sophia, John B., the national chairman of the Kenya National Union of Nurses, was to have a press conference within this vicinity earlier this morning. And it is believed that during that press conference, he was to call off the nurses' strike, citing that he was beginning fresh engagements with the Council of Governors to reach an amicable resolution to the ongoing nurses' strike. That press conference failed to kick off after another faction of leaders from the Kenya National Union of Nurses, led by its Secretary General Seth Panyako, stormed the particular news conference and, of course, laid claim that John B. was no longer an official of the union and did not speak on behalf of the union. So there was a bit of a back and forth there earlier on this morning. So John B.'s press conference basically did not kick off. And it was some sort of a takeover because now Seth Panyako engaged the media for another 1 hour or so, citing some of the reasons why the nurses' strike had not gone back to, the nurses' strike had not continued and nurses had not resumed their duties. Now, according to Seth Panyako, aside from the fact that he does not believe that John B. has any right to speak on behalf of the union, he was laying blame on 5 other individuals whom he say are stifling any progress to end the nurses' strike. Now, he says one of those individuals is Sarah Serem, who is the chair of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, whom he says has been colluding with the Council of Governors to deny nurses their hard-earned money and amounting to about 7.2 billion shillings. He had also faulted the chairman of the Council of Governors, Josephat Nanok, as well as Jack Ranguma and James Ongwae, who are heading the human resource and health dockets at the Council of Governors, as well as Jacqueline Mugeni, whom he says has been colluding with John B., the disgruntled chairman, to ensure that the Nurses Union National Executive Council does not operate functionally. So it's accusation and counter-accusation. Meanwhile, the strike continues. Seth Panyako says the strike is on. John B. was alluding to the fact that he may call off that particular strike. We are made aware that he might have a press conference later on in the day. The venue still remains unknown for now, but the back and forth between the union officials really tainting the nurses union in bad light and may go a long way in not solving this particular crisis, Sophia.
Right. So, Timothy, if this B goes ahead and calls off the strike, what position does he hold? Is it one that would be respected and adhered to by the nurses in as far as going back to work is concerned? Or who is it the nurses are listening to? Which faction?
Well, I believe that is basically the genesis of the crisis, because John B. says he was actually part of the negotiating team for what the nurses claim to be a CBA, which John B. says is not a CBA, but rather a negotiated document, and that in the middle of negotiations, his name was expunged from the list of officials representing the union, and he was basically locked out of the negotiations a few weeks back. So he says that actually there is no CBA. The negotiations are still ongoing. The document that the nurses claim to be the CBA is actually not the CBA. And remember, John B. last week, this is a strike that began last week on Monday. On Tuesday, a day after the strike kicked off, John B., while speaking to our colleague Elvis Kosgei in Uasin Gishu County, had declared the strike unsafe and unprotected and had urged the nurses to go back to work, even as the union officials sought better and amicable ways to solving the crisis. Well, since that declaration, no nurse has gone back to work. So basically you can see which side or which faction the nurses are leaning towards and who they are listening to in this particular dispute. Most likely they are on Seth Panyako's side and not John B, who appears to be disgruntled at the moment. And this morning he even came with documents proving that he is duly recognized by the Registrar of Trade Unions as the duly elected national chair. But that notwithstanding, it appears nurses are not really giving him a listening ear at the moment, Sophia.
All right, finally, briefly, team, do we know what the Council of Governors is saying, or have they just been quiet throughout all this?
Well, the Council of Governors yesterday gave a 24-hour ultimatum on the nurses to go back to work, or they will be seeking a legal redress to the situation. The Council of Governors the man in charge of health within the Council of Governors, James Ongwae, gave that ultimatum yesterday, saying nurses ought to go back to work within the next 24 hours. If they don't do that, then the Council of Governors either move to court or seek what they termed as quote-unquote legal mechanisms of resolving the health crisis. Now, whether this will mean hiring nurses from other countries, as we saw in the case of the doctors, still remains a matter of wait and see, and we still have to wait till that 24-hour ultimatum lapses. It lapses tonight, midnight. Meanwhile, Seth Panyako says they are not going to be going back to work until what they say is their CBA is signed and duly registered. Already the SRC has weighed itself in the matter, saying that the funds that the nurses are seeking basically is unsustainable, and the county governments have not given enough reason to the SRC that they can be able to sustain that particular wage bill. So we wait for that ultimatum to end. Meanwhile, the nurses say the strike is still on. The chairman says the strike ought to be called off. The Council of Governors has said they cannot do anything about it. And the CS for Health, Cleopa Mailu, on Wednesday also weighed into the matter, saying the national government should not be called into this issue. It's purely a county affair. Something that Seth Panyako says, according to the fourth schedule of the Constitution, the national government is involved in this crisis and is tasked with ensuring that the CBA is signed and registered. So it's a lot of fireworks here and there, accusations, counter-accusations. Meanwhile, Kenyans continue to suffer, Sophia.
All right, many thanks, Timothy Otieno, for that comprehensive update on the nurses' strike.